Morning, Jimmy Crow speaking. Yesterday I had a very hot discussion in Facebook concerning those Russians, about 80,000, 100,000 men who fled Russia during the last 3 weeks to Kazakhstan, to Georgia, and other countries, not to the Western Europe, which is now closed to Russians. Mostly these people are men who are obliged, supposedly, to serve in the army and are afraid of conscription and of dying in Ukraine as soldiers. And I've stated that they fled, and some of my acquaintances fled, and I approved this, and I think it's nice to save your life, but I stated that this is not an anti-war heroism, and compared this with the American anti-war movement in 1967 and 68, etc. And people told me that the difference is not very great, that people fled from States to Canada mostly, something about 60,000 people, and some fled to Western Europe, also because they were afraid of subscription, to be subscribed as soldiers, of conscription, sorry. I've checked the fact, yes, and I dare to say that in this sense, it was not a heroism, and it was also not a part of anti-war protest. There is still some difference, because Americans 60 years ago who fled to Canada or France, they've stated that they're against the war, that this war is unjust. Now, Russians who flee now to Georgia or Kazakhstan or Mongolia, they don't speak aloud that they are against this war. No. Why? Not because they're cowards, because they are not used to speak. This is the great difference between Americans and Russians in general. Americans, from the first years of their life, live in the society with a high level, maybe the highest in the human history level of communication, except maybe the most miserable strata of Americans, poverty. Poverty is as illness, and poor people are silent people. But majority of Americans, middle class, they are used to speak. They are used to have their opinion explicitly. And this is great. This is why I enjoy States and American culture. And in Russia, people like myself, this is a very rare bird, and I became such as I am now, speaking, not from my young years, no, only in 30s and 40s. But still, and this is one of the reasons, the lack of conscription, why the protests against the war in Iraq, in States, were not as numerous as the protest against Vietnam War. Because people are not going to be conscript. They're not afraid personally. Still, there was another difference, and there is another difference, because the protests against the war in 1967 in States were much louder than in modern Russia. And one guy, Baptist pastor, told me, It's safe in America to protest. They have courts, they have police, and so on and so forth. Yeah, yeah. But this police killed protesters in the University of Kent. And Martin Luther King Jr., he was killed, although courts, police, he was killed. So it was not very safe, actually. And it is not very safe now. The idea of safety is poison which kills freedom and liberty and humanity in myself. And I think that the present day reactionary mood, when people are more egoistic than 60 years ago, the right winged orientation of the majority, when people in states mostly protests, mass protesters, against migrants and against abortions, against the reproductive rights, actually, against habeas corpus, because abortion is the sin, and what is much worse, it's a mistake. It's an evil. But it's the right of a man, of a woman, to have her body as her property. Yeah. So there must be another way to oppose abortions than the legal prohibition. So what is the way out now for Russians, for Americans? To be less egoistic. We think that it is naturally for human to protest against something which touches him personally. This is a mistake. It's an animal way of doing things. We must use ourselves to be more altruistic, to feel one other's problems, Ukrainian, Pushtun, Iraqi, as my problems. For Bill Gates, the problem of Syrians, of deprived people, to be his own personal problem. This means the personal growth is not my inner world growing and becoming more powerful and powerful. Personal growth means to love another man as my own personal life. Yeah. Remember the Good Samaritan. I won't ask whom I am going to love. I will love myself. But what is myself? Myself is not someone who helps me. Myself is someone who needs my help, who is in some bad situation. So my personal growth means that problems of others become my problem. Jimmy Crotty, Moscow. Bye.